Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome. Good afternoon, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Children of the Sun program. I'm your host, Ray Bratcher. I do breathwork here on St. Croix and around the world. Coming to you live here from St. Croix, broadcasting on WSTX AM 970, the soul of the Caribbean, amplitude modulated. Welcome to the broadcast. Appreciate you joining us here on Children of the Sun. Appreciate your time. And welcome to the weekend as well. Since it is a Friday, June 12th, 2026 to be exact, currently 12:35 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, because we are situated right here in the beautiful turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. A pleasant good afternoon to Christiansted, Frederiksted, Kings Hill, why not? Buck Island, why not? And a pleasant good afternoon to our sister islands as well, St. Thomas, St. John. Yeah, let's include the new kid, Water Island. And a pleasant good afternoon to the World Wide Web and our global audience, especially the Crucian diaspora. If this is your first time joining us here on Children of the Sun, this show is all about positive and uplifting talk radio from the fifth dimension, a fifth dimensional metaphysical point of view, a higher consciousness point of view, and a wide-ranging exploration of the new consciousness and the St. Croix community. Currently, here on Children of the Sun, we're engaged in a special project, a 10-part series. 10 parts. And today is part 5, the midpoint, so to speak. So maybe it's a good idea to do a kind of a brief recap of where we've been so far before moving on. So, wow, so this is going to be an endeavor. We started this journey, if I could call it that, to address the current political and social climate, to navigate what we're calling the interregnum, that chaotic gap between where the old world is fading, the old power structures are collapsing, and the new world that is struggling to be born. As Antonio Gramsci penned from Mussolini's prison cell, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. In order to navigate this interregnum, and for us to be good midwives to the birth of this new world, we've been exploring a somatic and spiritual framework that helps us remain anchored, empowered, and monster-proof. So let's look back at where we started in episode 1. We realized that before we can even look out at the chaos of the world, we first have to serve a formal eviction notice to the political and social trauma that is living rent-free inside our nervous systems. We use the alignment of our internal points, pelvis, heart, head, and breathwork and polyvagal theory to find out that inner peace isn't some passive escape from reality. It's the literal prerequisite for intelligent action. We learned how to move out of the frantic beta state mind, which is contracted, hypervigilant, and easily manipulated, and step into a third state, a state of physiological safety, where we can see the crisis clearly without being shattered by it. Then we moved on to the next part 2, and in part 2 we were focused on reclaiming our biological sovereignty. We looked at how the 24-hour news cycle and those sensationalized headlines aren't just information. They are engineered trauma hooks, explicitly designed to snag your nervous system and lock you onto an emotional roller coaster. We introduce the 5 elements of breathwork as a somatic engine to deep clean those hooks right out of our cells. That gave us our foundational posture, learning how to stay completely informed on the world's events without letting those events infect our inner space. In episode 3, we went deep into the psychological and cosmological even architecture of this illusion. we unmask the demiurge, not as some far-off mythological entity, but as the modern, everyday force that architects the endless loop of trauma and drama to capture our life force. And we examine the collective ego, which is always chasing what we call false summits. The deceptive lie that says, if we just win this next election, or if this one bad actor finally goes to jail, then I will have peace. Thus making our peace under the control of forces outside of us. We expose that trap and practice finding the background, the ground of being, that changeless, unshakable silence, that peace that exists always underneath all the noise. And our last episode, part 4, we explored horizontal enlightenment. We went past the myth of the lone seeker, the idea that spiritual growth is an individual climbing a lonely mountain to leave the world behind. Here now in this space between worlds, in order to birth the new world, we need a new model, a new aspect of enlightenment. The enlightenment now has to be horizontal. It's found right here in the sacred living space between us. When I am fully present in my body and you are fully present in yours, we realize that the space between us is also us. And we meet in that shared space in horizontal enlightenment. And we related that to our local progressive values, looking at the true collective spirit of May Day and Memorial Day. We even considered this very community radio as us gathering across the airwaves to share this frequency, a radical, revolutionary reclamation of the commons of our shared awareness. We're taking back the commons. And today we're going to anchor that connection. So that's where we've been so far. Now, I want to share a piece of my own journey with you to clarify something very important about this horizontal path. When my own abiding state of embodied awakening occurred, it didn't come from reading books or studying academic philosophies. It happened right here, deeply, through my own personal breathwork practice on myself. In fact, it culminated when I received my very first sacred breathwork session directly from the Archangel Gabriel. That is the provenance and the lineage of the work I share with you here on St. Croix. It is a direct transmission of the heart born from the breath. But after that awakening settled into an abiding reality, I noticed something puzzling. I would, look at the internet, watch videos, read things written by other people talking about non-dual realization, and their descriptions felt fundamentally different from my experience. It was similar in terms of vastness, yes, but there was a distinct coldness in how they described it. I knew my awakening was genuine, full, and abiding, yet I felt a profound warmth and presence that they weren't talking about. I used to think there was only one kind of awakening, so this, I was really puzzled. So I started trying to find people who shared my experience. And I found a few rare people who shared this specific flavor of realization, and clarity came. And it turns out this has been known for hundreds, if not thousands of years. In the ancient Tibetan traditions, they recognized two primary ways of realizing non-duality. Most of what you see, popularized on the internet today is what the Tibetans call Rang Tong, which translates as self-emptiness or emptiness of self. It is a realization that sees the world as totally empty of intrinsic reality. So that's where you get this view you've probably seen in spiritual circles that says nothing is real, the world is a mirage, I am not real, there is no doer, so nothing matters, and there's no point in doing anything in the world. There's no point in becoming politically engaged. There's no point in resisting injustice. No point in resisting injustice. No point in standing up for others. But that's not what happened to me. What happened through the sacred breath and what I recognized in the profound work of some contemporary somatic pioneers, is what the Tibetans called Gentong, or other emptiness, or emptiness of other. Gentong, emptiness of other realization, means that while the mind is empty of conceptual delusions and a separate ego and separate ego constructs, the absolute reality is not a cold, empty void. It is full. It is full. It is inherently full of boundless love, luminous presence, unshakable warmth, and positive qualities. And this distinction is everything. Gentong, emptiness of other, is the ultimate antidote to the apathetic spiritual bypass. It realizes that there is a ground of being within you. Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, and that other people, in fact, everything else in the world, in the universe, shares that essential ground, that fundamental ground of being. But since it is all Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, since the person you are relating to is also in their essential nature Christ consciousness, and you are Christ consciousness, there is no other. You are one. So it is emptiness of other. There is Christ consciousness, there is no other. And even the space between us is not other. It is composed of that same fundamental ground of being. So instead of saying, I'm not going to help you because you don't exist, what's the point? This form of realization says, well, of course I'm going to help you. We're the same being. I see you and feel only unconditional love. How can I refuse your requests for help? The other view, the emptiness of self, the Rantong view, can leave good, well-meaning people feeling completely impotent, throwing up their hands and essentially ceding the material world to the worst, most predatory people, because nothing is real anyway. I mean, if all of the advanced spiritual people do not engage with current events, then who's left? Exactly. So when you experience the luminous fullness of Zhentong, other emptiness, emptiness of other, you realize that the world is a sacred expression of the divine. It gives you the exact reason, the passion, and the spiritual mandate to engage in politics, to resist injustice, to look out for the working class, and to love your neighbor with everything you've got. We are not trying to escape the world. We are here to bring the absolute fullness of the heart directly into it. And to consider what's going on currently as we cross the midpoint of this series, this project. I guess we're finding ourselves deeper in the interregnum than ever before. If you look out at the global landscape this week, you can see the accelerating decay of the old structure. The political machinery is grinding. The headlines are screaming. And the collective anxiety is palpable. The monsters are desperate for your energy. They want to pull you back into that small, defensive, head-centered position where you feel isolated and powerless. Excuse me. Let's look closely at how the dominant culture operates. It relies entirely on the illusion of the walled-off ego. It teaches you that your consciousness ends where your skin ends. From a progressive, community-oriented perspective, this is the ultimate capitalist trick. If they can privatize your mind, they can commodify your fear. They turn your natural human desire for safety into a defensive weapon, pointing you toward the other as the source of your problems. When we are trapped in that beta state mind, we are hyper-focused on the boundaries. We look at the world through a lens of lack and competition. We ask, how do I protect my property? How do I defend my status? How do I survive the crisis? But when we look to our cosmological origin, that whole framework dissolves. Remember, you are a localized expression of the absolute. Of God, of the universe, of consciousness. Before the illusion of separation arose from the infinite, the primordial ground, we recognize as God, as Shiva, the true nature, the Ein Sof, Al-Haq, or the Great Spirit, whatever you will call it. Before that illusion of separation arose, there was only the undivided heart. Inhabiting the shared space means realizing that the person sitting across from you, the person protesting in the streets, and yes, even the person fueling the political drama, is made of that exact same primordial substance, or energy, or consciousness. The wall of the ego is not a brick wall. It's a curtain of smoke. A thin veil, as the Course in Miracles puts it. And so that is what I was speaking about earlier. The massive, gigantic, massive pitfall that happens in a lot of spiritual circles, especially when the political world gets ugly. It's a head-centered bypass. It's that intellectual, non-embodied. They live in their heads. Their bodies are like down there. And there's even some teachers who want you to cultivate that feeling. But it's an intellectual, out-of-body, non-embodied position where people just throw their hands up and say, well, nothing is real anyway. It's all an illusion. So nothing matters and no one needs to do anything. That is not sovereignty. That is apathy disguised as high-mindedness. It's a spiritual bypass. It's a defensive retreat into the head because the heart is too overwhelmed to feel the weight of the world. It's a symptom of a nervous system that has gone into a dorsal shutdown, a state of freeze. The realization we need is embodied, is Shangtong. It is an embodied, non-dual awakening that allows you to be genuinely in the world but not of it. It means your feet are planted firmly on the red dirt of St. Croix. Your heart is wide open to the struggles of your community, and yet your center is anchored in the changeless absolute. That's absolute with a capital A. We don't bypass the world. We engage with it from a position of absolute authenticity and clarity centered in the heart. We don't run from the crises. We bring the medicine of our presence to the crisis. We bring the medicine of our presence to the crisis. And I think you can see how that type of engagement will give a healing effect. Instead of making everything worse. Instead of making everything worse. but we still engage. We just engage in a way that heals instead of hurts. So, how do we do this when the world is shaking? We do it by shifting our internal posture. One of the people I found who was experiencing this emptiness of other as I did, and explains it quite nicely, is a woman named Dr. Judith Blackstone. So she has a somatic architecture that she calls inhabiting the body. Most of the time we live a few inches outside ourselves, projected out into our anxieties, our smart devices, or the latest global catastrophe. To inhabit the shared space between us, you must first fully occupy your own physical body. You have to feel the space inside your cells from head to toe, from the top of your head down to the soles of your feet. Let's do this. Let's do this now through the airwaves. Just feel your 3 points. The clear sky of your head. The unshakable warmth of your heart. And the heavy ground of your pelvis. And now, instead of treating your skin like a boundary or a fortress wall, realize it is permeable. It is a filter, not a barrier. As you breathe in, feel the space inside your body. As you breathe out, notice that the space inside you is continuous with the space outside you. There is no break in the fabric of consciousness. You are swimming in the same ocean of awareness as everyone else in this community. When you occupy your body this deeply, you create an unshakable ground. You become a stabilizing force for every nervous system around you. And this brings us to the core of our progressive community mission. Why do we do this on a community radio station? Because a community radio show like this is a living model of the shared space. I'm sitting on this microphone and you're in your car, your kitchen, or your workplace. I'm speaking into the mic and you're hearing the words. We are creating an invisible network of shared attention. The commercial world wants to fracture this network. They want to split us into algorithmic silos, so we only hear echoes of our own anger. But by gathering here week after week to engage in both deep spiritual work and political analysis, we are reclaiming the commons of our collective mind. We are creating a container that can hold the truth of the current crisis without cracking under the pressure. And I want to be beautiful and clear about something. This is for everyone. Please don't listen to this show and think, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not an awakened master and I don't expect to be one anytime soon. This is not an elite club for a chosen few. Anyone can learn this simple skill of temporarily inhabiting the shared space between us. In our modern culture, just look around. It's a modern culture that is systematically designed to keep you agitated, distracted, and fearful. So the vast majority of our brothers and sisters are stuck in a near constant state of fight or flight or deep internal shutdown. Many people have gone their entire lives without ever experiencing what's called the ventral vagal state, that beautiful polyvagal frequency of absolute safety, inner calm, and open social connection, where you feel surrounded by friends rather than enemies. But one of the miracles of human biology is that we co-regulate. When a group of people gathers, even if they are stressed and anxious, if there's even one person in that space who abides in that calm, open, unshakable presence, they serve as a living anchor. Their nervous system models the safety, and like a tuning fork, everyone else can at least temporarily enter that ventral vagal state of peace and cooperation. This is the natural state of the human being. And the more people who learn sacred breath, the more anchors we have. And if we practice temporarily entering this state week after week, establishing the mental and emotional clarity needed to act rather than react, needed to respond rather than react, to resist injustice, and to act as midwives to the new world Who knows? Awakening seems to be it becoming a more common human experience in our accelerated world as the internet makes it possible to share information quickly from person to person. So maybe this regular practice of temporarily touching the ground every week may very well bloom into your own abiding permanent realization. So that's the spiritual benefit. But there is also a engagement with the material world and society and culture and political benefit that not only gives us permission to resist injustice and help our brothers and sisters, but also makes it easier. Because when we touch this shared space, we realize that this isn't just the cure for the loneliness epidemic or the social isolation. A lot of us feel. It's also the cure, the absolute cure, for the widespread material suffering we are enduring under the old world structures. The power structures of the old world. We look at the poverty, the stress, the endless struggle, and we hear the powers that be whisper, oh well, that's just how it is. That's just the economy. I'm here as a voice of love and clarity to tell you that that is a lie. It does not have to be this way. It is not an unchangeable given. We deserve better. We, the working class of the richest country on earth, we, the working class of the richest country in the history of the world, deserve nice things. We deserve to have beautiful lives filled with prosperity, ease, and abundance, entirely free from the grinding financial anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck. We deserve to be paid a living wage that honors our humanity. We deserve to be paid enough to live. We deserve free, universal health care. I mean, if you just look at the stark reality of the data tracked by global economic organizations like the OECD, which represents the world's highly developed, high-income economies, out of the 38 advanced countries that make up the OECD, the United States is the sole exception that does not guarantee universal health care coverage to its citizens. It's a 37-to-1 ratio. Every single one of our peer nations, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Canada, Japan, Australia, all 37 guarantees health coverage as a basic human right. We're the only one that doesn't. The U.S. stands completely alone among high-income countries, but we have peers. We share our lack of universal health care with developing nations or countries managing severe internal conflicts, civil wars, like Nigeria, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan. Think about that. In the richest nation in the history of the world, 66% of all personal bankruptcies are tied directly to medical issues. That is a moral failure, and it does not have to be this way. It is not a given. We deserve free, high-quality education for our children for as far as they want to go to reach their maximum potential and happiness. Whether that means earning a PhD in quantum physics or a trade school certificate in carpentry, agriculture, or animal husbandry. We deserve universal child care, paid family leave, dignified care for our elderly and our disabled brothers and sisters, immediate housing for the homeless, shorter work weeks so we can actually spend time with our families, and a bold Green New Deal before our beautiful planet becomes lifeless. And please, do not let them tell you we don't have the money. Finding the money never seems to be a problem when the old world wants to send us to war. We're spending $1 billion a day on our military conflict with Iran right now, with long-term costs projected to be $1 trillion with a T, as in Tom. $1 trillion. To put that into perspective, just one day, a single day of that war spending could fully finance a whole year of universal pre-K or high-quality child care for 80,000 American children. And the Pentagon just requested an additional $200 billion from Congress. That extra $200 billion is enough money to completely end chronic homelessness in the United States, or fund universal tuition-free community college across the entire country for a decade. But the old world doesn't do that. Instead, they raise taxes on the working class and cut them for the billionaires. We only have it this way because we choose to go along with someone else's predatory priorities. But that old world is the one that is dying. We are the midwives of a new world where our priorities of love, care, and abundance are acknowledged and made real. So let's stop going along with their anxiety program and let's return to our source of power. We're going to do a simple, profound practice together right now called the 20 Connected Breaths. And this is a foundational element of sacred breathwork. What this exercise does is immediately interrupts the fight or flight response, clearing the mental fog and pulling your nervous system directly into that safe, calm, ventral vagal space. And the instructions are beautiful and simple. We'll do you breathe 4 times as fast as you can, and the 5th breath is as deep as you can. 4 fast, distinct breaths followed by 1 deep, full breath. We do that 4 times without stopping, creating 20 fully connected breaths. There must be no pauses between the inhale and the exhale. Just a smooth, circular wheel of breath. The inhale merges into the next exhale. The exhale merges into the next inhale. There's no pausing between breaths. Breathing in and out through the mouth. We breathe in and out through the mouth, pulling the breath deep into the belly, keeping the rhythm active, fast, and deep. So just get comfortable. Relax your shoulders, and we could begin. I'll count them off for you. 3. I'll do a countdown from 3, and you don't have to match me exactly. Breathe what's fast for you and what's deep for you. It may not be the same for everyone. Okay, let's begin. 3, 2, 1. Inhale, exhale, fast and active. Inhale, exhale, smooth. Inhale, keep it moving. Exhale. Inhale, exhale. Now open up, deep. Inhale fully, deep, and just let it go. Breath 6, inhale, exhale. 7, in, out. Keep it circular, keep it connected. 8, in, out. No pauses, in, out. And the deep one, breathe it all the way in. Let it melt out. Inhale, exhale, active and smooth, fast. Breathe in, exhale. 4 fast ones. Inhale, exhale, connect them. Inhale, exhale, open the chest, deep. Pull it from the horizon, and relax into the release. Last 5. Breath 16. Inhale, exhale. Keep up this pace. Inhale, exhale. Fast. Inhale, exhale. Dissolving the boundaries. Inhale, exhale. 1 more deep inhale to your absolute maximum capacity. Hold it for just a sweet moment at the top and let it completely float away. Now let your breath return to its normal natural rhythm. Close your eyes if it's safe to do so. Bring your attention directly into your body. Notice the shift. Notice the tingling in your fingers, the warmth in your chest, the sudden quietness in your mind. You have just shifted your physiology. You have stepped off the roller coaster and entered the safe harbor of the ventrovagal state. With your eyes closed and your body anchored in this calm peace, let's expand this frequency into our collective field. Feel the space inside your own physical frame, the head, the heart, the pelvis. Now visualize your awareness gently expanding beyond your skin. See the room you are in filling with this luminous, warm presence. Now let's project this vision across our entire listening circle. Visualize a golden grid of light stretching out from the studio here in Christiansted, reaching across to the streets of Frederiksted, moving through the valleys of Kings Hill, and illuminating the waters around Buck Island. See this light leaping across the Caribbean Sea, touching St. Thomas, resting on St. John, warming Water Island. Now let that visualization expand across the global web. Reaching out across the globe. See every single person listening to this broadcast right now as a glowing point of light, all immersed in the exact same continuous, undivided ocean of fundamental consciousness. We are not separate islands. We are one single, unbroken continent of awareness. Feel the absolute safety of this shared space. We are co-regulating together as a sovereign community. We are modeling the peace that the old world cannot understand. Rest in this unity for just a moment. One heart, one breath, one collective field. So we spent this hour clearing the space and finding our center. We've served the eviction notice to the drama. Now we turn our eyes to the horizon. As we move into part 16 of Mike Brock's The Crisis, let's maintain this shared space, this horizontal enlightenment. We're going to look at the accelerating events of our shared reality, but we're going to bring the medicine of our presence to it. We remain informed, but not deformed. We are not infected and defective, but protected and collective. We are looking at a world that is failing from a heart that is certain. The Crisis, number 16, on the Republic of Heaven, by Mike Brock. Marco Rubio stood in Munich and called for the defense of Western civilization. He did this while the administration he serves was attempting to indict 6 members of Congress for telling soldiers to obey the Constitution. While 352,000 federal workers had been purged from their post. While the Environmental Protection Agency was dismantling the legal architecture for regulating the poisoning of the air. While the Department of Homeland Security shutdown left the agencies responsible for protecting the country unfunded at midnight. While the economic damage inflicted on Minneapolis, where this series began, at the site of the first great immigration raids, were being tallied at $200 million. Western civilization. He said it the way a man holds up a shield, the way a man invokes a father's name to win a fight the father would have disowned. Let's talk about Western civilization. The claim is familiar by now. You have heard it from Rubio. You have heard it from 100 lesser men at 100 lesser podiums. It goes like this. We are the inheritors of a tradition. That tradition runs from Athens to Rome to the Enlightenment to the American founding. It produced reason, democracy, individual liberty, the rule of law. It is under threat. From the outside, from the alien, from the unassimilated. Our task is to defend it. Every sentence is a description. Not one is a prescription. And the conclusion that we must organize our politics around the defense of this inheritance presents itself as self-evident. The blade falls here. Who selected the inheritance? Athens produced democracy and slavery. Rome produced the Republic and the empire that devoured it. The Enlightenment produced the Declaration of Independence and the philosophical architecture of colonial extraction. The American founding produced popular sovereignty and chattel slavery in the same document by the same hands. Western civilization is not a description of a tradition. It is a selection from a tradition. Someone chose which parts count. And the choosing is the normative act. The ought smuggled inside the is. The prescription hidden behind the description. You are not inheriting a civilization when you invoke it this way. You are building one in the present for present purposes and projecting it backward onto history to give it the authority of inevitability. This is the view from nowhere applied to culture. The same operation, Part 13 of the series, identified in journalism. The same operation number 14 identified in economics. The same operation number 15 identified in the technological determinism of men who insist the future is fixed. A claim so comprehensive, so sweeping, so rooted in the deep past that it appears to transcend any particular political commitment. But it doesn't. It never does. It is always someone standing somewhere selecting what counts and refusing to say so. Rubio is not a historian. He is a politician in Munich, wrapping himself in a word that sounds like a fact and functions like a weapon. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because I am not going to argue that Western civilization is a fiction. Traditions are real. Intellectual lineages are real. The path from Thales to Hume to the founding of a republic on the premise that human beings can govern themselves, that is a real path, and I stand on it. This series stands on it. Every paper in this sequence draws from the Western philosophical tradition. Hume's guillotine, Camus' absurd hero, Paine's pamphleteering, Jefferson's substitution of happiness for property. And I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I am going to argue is that the tradition, honestly understood, dissolves the very claim Rubio is making with it. And the man who saw this most clearly was not a European. Or rather, he was a European who had the intellectual honesty to follow the tradition's logic past the boundary the tradition had set for itself. His name was Alan Watts. Watts is the figure who stands in the breach. Born in England, educated in the Anglican tradition, steeped in European philosophy, and then he did something unforgivable. He read the Eastern texts with the same seriousness he brought to the Western ones, and he discovered that the boundary between the two was a fiction. Not meaningless. Traditions have geographies, languages, institutional histories, but the hard line, the one that Rubio's invocation depends on, the one that separates our civilization from theirs, the one that makes Western thought a possession to be defended against Eastern contamination, that line dissolves the moment you read the thinkers carefully. Hume argues that the self is not a fixed substance, but a bundle of perceptions. constantly in flux, with no permanent observer behind the stream of experience. The Buddha, 23 centuries earlier, calls this anatta, no self. They are not making the same claim in every detail, but they are looking at the same problem from different hemispheres, and what they see is compatible in ways that the defenders of civilizational boundaries cannot afford to admit. Hume argues that causation is a habit of mind, not a feature of reality as it is in itself. Nagarjuna, the 2nd century Buddhist philosopher, argues that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, that what we call causes and effects are conventional designations, not ultimate truths. Again, not identical, but the family resemblance is unmistakable, and it did not require cultural contamination to produce. The Western tradition arrived at these insights through its own methods. Watts saw this. He saw that the most radical insights in the Western tradition, Hume's demolition of the fixed self, the empiricist insistence that experience is primary, the Enlightenment's slow erosion of every claim to stand outside the system and observe it from above, were already in conversation with what the Eastern tradition had been exploring for millennia. The conversation had been happening for centuries. The philosophers just hadn't noticed because they'd been told the wall between East and West was real. I'm going to take a sip of water. And he, Watts, concluded, rightly, the wall is the problem. Not because all traditions are the same, because the insistence on the wall is itself a form of the view from nowhere. The claim that there exists a civilizational boundary so fundamental that it defines the limits of what counts as real thought. And that claim, like every other version of the view from nowhere this series has examined, conceals a normative commitment behind a description. The wall is not a geographical fact. It is a decision about whose insights count. Watts took a sledgehammer to it. Good. But here is my quarrel with Watts, and it is a lover's quarrel, and it matters for everything that follows. Watts gets the diagnosis right. The fixed self is a fiction. The boundary between observer and observed is permeable. The Tao, the eternal now, the ground of what is, does not have a king. Reality is process, not substance. Flow, not fixture. He follows Hume's demolition to its eastern shore and discovers that the shore was already populated, that the truth had been living there under different names, and he sits down. He sits down. The resolution Watts offers is acceptance. Stop clinging. Stop grasping. Recognize yourself as the wave that is also the ocean. The anxiety of the separate self is the illusion. Dissolve it, and what remains is peace, the eternal now, complete, needing nothing. And I want to say, almost. You got so close. You brought Hume to the East and the East to Hume, and you showed that the greatest minds on both sides of the fictional wall were looking at the same thing, and then you sat down on the beach and called it wisdom. But the Enlightenment has a corrective to offer. Hume does not end at the bundle theory. Hume ends at convention, at the social compact, at the agreements communities make to organize the stream of experience into something livable. The self is not fixed. Watts is right about that. But the self is not nothing. The self is responsible. It inherits. It orients. It steers. Camus does not end at the absurd. He ends at the revolt. The recognition that life has no guaranteed meaning is not an invitation to dissolve. It is the precondition for the creation of meaning by you, from where you stand, right now. The absurd hero does not sit down. The absurd hero pushes the rock. Paine does not end at the critique of monarchy. He ends at the pamphlet, at the act of creation that brings new political reality into being through language, through argument, through the insistence that what does not yet exist should exist, and that you, the reader, the citizen, the person holding this page, have the obligation to help build it. The Enlightenment, at its honest best, does not just dissolve the fixed observer, it replaces the observer with an agent, a being who inherits the capacity to create, and who discovers in that inheritance an obligation. Not because a God commands it, not because a tradition demands it, because the structure of consciousness itself, the tension between memory and imagination, the pull between what was lost and what might be made, is not a stillness to be accepted. It is a dynamism to be navigated. The Eastern tradition teaches us that there is no view from nowhere. Correct. The Enlightenment teaches us that because there is no view from nowhere, someone must steer. Watts brought us into the water. The corrective says, now build a ship. I want to tell you what I think the universe is, not what it is like, what it is. The great Tao is the eternal now, the only thing that has ever been, the only thing that will ever be. There is nothing outside it, there is no before it. There is no perspective from which it can be observed as a whole, because it is the whole, and the observer is inside it. The Eastern tradition is correct about this, and Hume, the most honest philosopher the West produced, is compatible with it. And within the eternal now, consciousness orients. It turns toward memory and encounters loss, the knowledge that what was here has departed, that the present is always leaving itself behind, that to have loved is to have created the possibility of grief. It turns toward imagination and encounters creation, the capacity to envision what has never existed and bring it into being, to stand in the now and reach toward what is not yet. And in the tension between these orientations, between what might be lost and what might be made, between memory and imagination, between grief and hope, love emerges, not as a feeling, as a structure, the structure of consciousness itself, the thing that is the pulling between creation and loss, the thing that makes the now unbearable and magnificent simultaneously. This is a three-body problem. I do not mean this as metaphor. A three-body problem. The eternal now, the orientation toward memory, the orientation toward imagination, has no closed-form solution. You cannot write an equation from outside the system that predicts its trajectory for all time. You can compute it step by step, moment by moment from within. The system is deterministic. There's nothing mystical about it, but it is irreducibly navigational. The only way through it is to steer. There is no vantage point from which the trajectory resolves into a line you can see from end to end. There is no view from nowhere, not because we are limited, because the universe is limited in this way. The structure of reality does not contain a position from which reality can be seen whole. That is not a bug. It is the feature that makes consciousness, makes love, makes creation possible. If the trajectory were visible from above, there would be nothing to steer. And if there were nothing to steer, there would be no reason to be awake. Watts understood the Tao. He understood the eternal now. He understood that the observer cannot stand outside the system. He did not follow the thread to its conclusion, that within the system, the created must keep creating. That the capacity for imagination, the ability to orient toward what does not yet exist and bring it into being, is not an accident to be accepted. It is an inheritance, and the inheritance places an obligation on the inheritor. Steer, because you can. And love each other, because you must. I wrote elsewhere, in David Bowie is God, about what happens when God incarnates. God builds the universe, stands outside it, sees everything from above, omniscience perfected, the view from nowhere achieved at last. And it is the loneliest position imaginable, because knowing everything from outside means experiencing nothing from inside. God has all the is and none of the ought. He is trapped on the wrong side of his own guillotine. So he visits, not out of mercy, out of need. The creation is generating something omniscience cannot access, what it is like to be in it. Experience, the inside of things, the view from somewhere. He chooses a body. He lives in it. He accumulates personas, incarnations, stations, identities, each one genuine, each one partial, each one teaching him what the universe looks like from there. And over the course of a life, he discovers what the theologians could not, that the view from above was the empty thing, that omniscience without experience is death, that the ought, the fear, the love, the commitment, the standing somewhere and caring what happens from where you stand is the only part of the creation that was ever real. God crosses his own guillotine, moves from is to ought, and at the end, sitting across from you, he delivers the revelation. The ship has no destination. It was only ever a journey. And the magic of existence is you get to steer. And then God gets up from the table and disappears into the city streets. Why? What is he doing? I will tell you what he is doing. He has concluded that heaven must not be a kingdom, but a republic. A kingdom has a sovereign, someone who stands outside and above, who sees everything, decides everything from a position that is not inside the thing being governed. The kingdom is the political form of the view from nowhere, and heaven, the traditional heaven, the one the defenders of Western civilization tacitly invoke when they reach for the deep past, is the kingdom perfected, a place where the view from nowhere is finally fully true, where God sits above, arranges everything, and the souls below receive their arrangement. Eternal, fixed, no three-body problem, no steering required, the trajectory resolved once and for all. God looks at that, the God who incarnated, who got afraid in Manhattan, who was consumed by his own creation and survived, who crossed the guillotine and discovered that the ought is the only real thing, and says, no. That is the prison I was escaping. The kingdom is the loneliness I built for myself before I knew what loneliness was. Omniscience without experience, the is without the ought. Heaven as a kingdom is the eternal now with the tension removed. No memory, no imagination, no loss, no creation, which means no love, which means no consciousness, which means nothing. So heaven must be a republic, a place where no one stands outside, where the beings who were created inherit the obligation to keep creating, where the navigation is shared because the three-body problem cannot be solved by a sovereign. It can only be steered by participants, where God does not reign, where God does not observe, where God disappears into the street because the street is where the republic lives, among the citizens, in the tension, steering together. This is what Paine knew and could not say in these terms. The American Revolution was not merely political, it was cosmological. The claim that human beings can govern themselves without a king, without a sovereign, without an authority that stands outside the system and dictates its trajectory, is a claim about the structure of reality. It is the claim that the kingdom model is a lie, not just a bad form of government, a lie about how the universe works. There is no position above the system. There is no sovereign perspective. There is no one who gets to see the whole trajectory and announce its destination. There are only citizens standing somewhere, steering. Monarchy was never just a political arrangement. It was a cosmology. The king ruled because God ruled, and God ruled from outside, and the whole claim of authority flowed from the view from nowhere downward through the stations of power. To overthrow the king was to overthrow the cosmology, to declare that heaven itself must be reorganized. The founders did this, not perfectly, not completely. Jefferson could write, "All men are created equal," while enslaving human beings, because the revolution was cosmological in principle and incomplete in practice. The republic was born in contradiction because the three-body problem does not resolve into cleanliness. You steer imperfectly. You do not get to stop steering because the course is impure. But the principle, the structural insight that there is no view from nowhere, not in politics, not in epistemology, not in the cosmos itself, that was the gift, the actual gift, the one that matters. Not Western civilization as a brand, not Athens to Rome to us as a family crest. The insight that the kingdom is a lie, and the republic is the structure that most honestly reflects the nature of reality. And this is why Rubio's invocation is not just a political distortion, it is a theological one. He is invoking the kingdom while standing inside the republic. He is claiming the authority of a tradition whose deepest achievement was the abolition of exactly the authority he is claiming. The West's gift, if you want to call it a gift, was not a civilization to be ruled over. It was the discovery that ruling over is the wrong relationship to reality, that heaven itself must be reorganized along Republican lines. To defend Western civilization by building a kingdom is to desecrate the inheritance you claim to protect. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us with a harder task than Rubio imagines. It leaves us with a tradition that, honestly understood, cannot be defended, because the tradition, at its best, insists that nothing is defended by standing outside and above. The tradition can only be enacted, practiced, continued by people standing somewhere specific, seeing from where they stand, steering. It leaves us with Watts, who brought the East and West together and showed us that the wall between them was the last version of the view from nowhere. The claim that there exists a civilizational boundary so real it determines whose insights count. He demolished the wall. That was necessary work. And then he sat down, and we must not sit down. It leaves us with the eternal now and the tension between memory and imagination and the love that emerges in the space between creation and loss. It leaves us with the three-body problem that has no sovereign solution, no closed-form answer, no trajectory visible from above, only steering, only the next moment and the next decision, and the willingness to remain awake inside a system that cannot be seen whole. It leaves us with the obligation that the created must keep creating, that consciousness is not a spectator sport, that the capacity to imagine what does not yet exist is the inheritance, and the inheritance is not a trophy to be displayed. It is a commission to be honored by building, by steering, by refusing to sit down. And it leaves us with God, the one who incarnated, who lived, who was afraid, who discovered that the ought was real and the kingdom was a prison, disappearing into the street. He is not abandoning the creation, he is joining it. He is becoming a citizen of the Republic of Heaven. He is picking up the tools and doing what citizens do, participating in the three-body problem, in the tension, in the steering that has no destination and no end. Heaven is not above us. Heaven is this, the now, the tension, the love, the work, the ship we are building while we sail it, the republic we are founding while we live in it. There never was a kingdom. There was only ever the street and the citizens on it and the work of creation that never ends because it was never supposed to end. Steer the ship because you can. Love each other because you must. And do not let any man in Munich, in Washington, in any palace or podium on this earth tell you that the inheritance is a crown. The inheritance is a compass, and it points wherever you have the courage to go. And that is the end of number 15 of Mike Brock's The Crisis Papers. and the end of the program for today, June 12th, 2026. I want to thank you all for joining me here on Children of the Sun, joining our special project. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I love you all. Enjoy your weekend. Get your electromagnetic energy body out into nature this weekend if you can. Get some sand on your feet. And keep it right here. We got keep it right here on WSTX AM 970 for Dreamcatchers coming up next. We are